Crystal teardrops cascaded from the grand maple's chandelier, casting prisms across silk gowns and diamond tiaras. Helena Blackwood commanded the marble stage like a queen surveying her kingdom, her obsidian dress flowing like liquid midnight. The 20-carat solitaire on her finger blazed under spotlights as she lifted the microphone with theatrical grace. "If you can dance this waltz," her voice poured like aged wine through the hushed ballroom, "I'll marry you." A collective intake of breath. Champagne glasses froze mid-sip. Then her gaze turned predatory, hunting through shadows until it found its prey. A lone figure in grey coveralls, methodically polishing silver with weathered hands. Her smile sharpened to a blade's edge. "Even our humble janitor here," she purred, each word dripping venom disguised as honey. "Surely you're brave enough to try." The ballroom crystallized into absolute silence. 200 pairs of eyes pivoted toward the man whose calloused fingers had gone white against his cleaning cloth. Ryan Torres felt the weight of every stare pressing against his shoulders like lead blankets. His uniform suddenly felt rougher against his skin, the industrial fabric a stark reminder of the chasm between him and these people who measured worth in stock portfolios and trust funds. He'd cleaned these same marble floors for 3 years, invisible to everyone except when they needed their champagne spills mopped up. Now he stood pinned like a butterfly under glass, every breath echoing in the cathedral silence. The microphone feedback screeched through speakers, making several women wince behind their fans. Helena's emerald eyes never left his face, waiting for him to crumble, to shuffle away with his tail between his legs like she expected. Outside in the parking lot, 8-year-old Lucy Torres stirred in the back seat of their dented Honda Civic. Her school backpack contained a single photograph. Her parents on their wedding day, Maria radiant in white satin, Ryan in his only suit, both swaying to music only they could hear. The radio crackled softly, playing an old waltz that made her smile in her sleep. She'd asked her father just that morning if he remembered how to dance, like in the picture. He'd gone quiet, the way he always did when she mentioned Mama, then kissed her forehead and promised they'd talk about it later. Later never seemed to come anymore. Back in the ballroom, Helena's patience wore thin as silk threads. "Well?" she pressed, her voice carrying across the vast space like a whip crack. "Surely someone here has the courage to try. Or are Vermont's finest men all afraid of a simple dance?" The orchestra sat poised, violins raised, waiting for her signal. She could taste victory already. Another evening where she proved that money and power were the only currencies that mattered. Another reminder that she was untouchable, unreachable, perfectly alone in her ivory tower. The janitor hadn't moved yet, hadn't spoken, hadn't given her the satisfaction of his humiliation. That wouldn't do at all. Senator James Wellington cleared his throat from the front table, his wife Catherine shooting nervous glances between Helena and the cleaning man. "Perhaps we should move on to the auction," he suggested diplomatically. "The Children's Hospital Fund." But Helena raised one manicured hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. Her attention remained fixed on Ryan like a laser beam. She'd started this game, and she would finish it. The Blackwood name didn't back down from challenges, especially not from people who earned minimum wage and smelled of industrial disinfectant. Her mother had taught her that much before teaching her anything else. Ryan's mind drifted to another ballroom, another lifetime. 15 years ago, when he'd worn a borrowed tuxedo to the Blackwood Estate's summer gala, his heart hammering as he asked a 19-year-old Helena to dance. She'd laughed then, bright and unguarded, her hand fitting perfectly in his as they'd spun across her family's terrace under stars that seemed close enough to pluck. They'd been kids playing at being adults, drunk on possibility and each other's presence. Before Margaret Blackwood had made her offer, before everything changed, before he learned that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. The memory hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath. Maria's voice echoed in his head from that hospital room 3 years ago, her hand skeletal in his as she whispered, "Don't let my love be the last love you ever know. Lucy needs to see her daddy dance with joy, not just memory." She'd made him promise to live, not just survive. To find happiness again, not for himself, but for their daughter, who needed to believe in magic. He'd failed that promise every day since, choosing safety in shadows over the terrifying possibility of being seen. Helena's foot began tapping against the marble, her patience evaporating like morning mist. The crowd grew restless, whispers starting to buzz through the assembled elite like angry wasps. This wasn't going according to plan. The janitor was supposed to decline gracefully, maybe mumble an apology and scurry back to his corner. Instead, he stood there like a statue, staring at her with those storm-grey eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed armor. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition? Impossible. She would remember meeting the help. Lucy woke up in the car, her small hand pressed against the cold window. Through the hotel's tall windows, she could see her father surrounded by people in fancy clothes. He looked smaller than usual, hunched under their stares like he was trying to disappear. She pressed her face closer to the glass, fogging it with her breath. Daddy never talked about the time before Mama got sick, but sometimes she caught him humming old songs while he cleaned their tiny apartment. Songs that made him smile and cry at the same time. Maybe tonight he would remember how to be happy again. Inside, the tension stretched taut as piano wire. Helena's smile had turned brittle around the edges, her composure cracking like ice under pressure. She'd created this moment to prove a point about knowing one's place, but the janitor's silence was making her look foolish instead of powerful. Margaret Blackwood watched from the VIP balcony above, her expression unreadable behind her opera glasses. She'd seen her daughter play these power games before, but something about this particular man made her stomach tighten with old memories and older regrets. Ryan finally moved, his work boots clicking against marble as he stepped forward. The sound echoed through the ballroom like gunshots, making several people jump. He pulled off his rubber gloves slowly, deliberately, revealing hands that were scarred but clean, calloused but gentle. The cleaning rag fell to the floor with a whisper of cotton against stone. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear, carrying to every corner of the vast room. One dance. That was all. 2 words that changed everything. Helena blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. She'd expected refusal, not acceptance. The orchestra looked to her for direction, violins still poised. "You're serious?" she asked, and for just a moment her carefully controlled facade slipped, revealing something almost vulnerable underneath. Then the mask snapped back into place, ice replacing surprise. "Very well. Strauss, the Blue Danube. If you can manage the 3/4 time without stepping on my Louboutins." The musicians exchanged glances but raised their instruments. This was either going to be spectacular or spectacularly embarrassing. As the opening notes drifted through the ballroom, Ryan climbed the steps to the stage. Up close, Helena could smell sawdust and honest sweat, could see the careful way he'd shaved around a small scar on his jaw. His uniform was clean but worn, the fabric soft with countless washings. When he offered his hand, she hesitated for a heartbeat. His palm was warm and steady against hers, nothing like the soft, manicured hands of the men who usually asked her to dance. There was something familiar about his touch, like an echo of a dream she couldn't quite remember. The waltz began tentatively, Helena leading out of habit and pride. But by the 4th measure, something shifted. Ryan's hand found the small of her back with practiced ease, guiding her into the rhythm with a confidence that made her breath catch. He wasn't looking at his feet or counting steps. Instead, his grey eyes held hers with an intensity that made her feel exposed, like he could see past all her carefully constructed walls to the frightened girl hidden underneath. When had anyone last looked at her like she was more than her bank account? They moved together across the marble floor, her designer gown flowing around his work boots in perfect counterpoint. The crowd faded into background noise, their gasps and whispers becoming irrelevant as the music swelled. Helena found herself following his lead, something she hadn't done since… No, she wouldn't think about that. Wouldn't remember summer nights and secret promises made under her family's oak tree. This was different. This was a stranger who happened to know how to waltz. Nothing more. But as Ryan spun her through a complex turn sequence that would challenge even professional dancers, Helena's certainty crumbled. These weren't basic steps learned from YouTube videos. This was classical training, years of practice, muscle memory carved deep into bone and sinew. When he lifted her in a move that left her floating for a heartbeat, she felt something crack open in her chest. A door she'd sealed shut so long ago she'd forgotten it existed. Margaret Blackwood stood abruptly from her balcony seat, her opera glasses clattering to the floor. The color had drained from her face as she watched her daughter dance with a ghost from their past. "No," she whispered, the word lost in the music's crescendo. "It can't be." But the way he moved, the tilt of his head when he concentrated, the gentle strength in his arms, she would know those anywhere. Ryan Torres, the boy she'd paid to disappear, who'd taken her money and broken her daughter's heart. The boy who was supposed to be safely buried in California. Not here, not now, not dancing with Helena like no time had passed at all. The final notes of the waltz hung in the air like morning fog. Ryan and Helena stood frozen in the traditional ending pose, his arm around her waist, her hand in his, both breathing hard from more than just exertion. The ballroom held its breath, waiting for the spell to break, for reality to reassert itself. When it did, the applause was thunderous, but Helena barely heard it. She was staring into storm-gray eyes that seemed to hold secrets, questions she was afraid to ask, and answers she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. "Who are you?" she whispered, the words meant only for him. But before Ryan could answer, Margaret's voice cut through the applause like a blade through silk. "Ryan Torres," she called from the balcony, her tone carrying 15 years of guilt and regret. "After all these years—" The ballroom fell silent again, sensing drama more intoxicating than champagne. Helena's face went white as bone china, her hand trembling in Ryan's. The name hit her like a physical blow, bringing with it a flood of memories she'd spent decades trying to forget. The summer she turned 19 rushed back in vivid detail, stolen kisses in the greenhouse, dancing on the terrace to her father's old records, planning a future that seemed as infinite as the Vermont sky. Ryan Torres, the gardener's son with gentle hands and dreams bigger than his circumstances. The boy who'd loved her with the fierce devotion of first love, who'd made her believe in fairy tales and happy endings. The boy who'd vanished without explanation, leaving only a note saying he was sorry, that she deserved better than someone like him. Helena jerked backward, nearly stumbling in her designer heels. "You're supposed to be in California," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "The scholarship. Berkeley. You left." Ryan's jaw tightened, pain flickering across his features like lightning across a dark sky. "I came back," he said simply, but the words carried the weight of 15 years of regret. Things changed. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, sensing blood in the water. This was better than any reality show, Vermont's elite watching their ice queen crack in real time. Catherine Wellington leaned toward her husband's ear, her whisper carrying in the sudden quiet. "Did she know?" James shook his head, equally transfixed by the drama unfolding on stage. Neither of them had ever seen Helena Blackwood show genuine emotion before. She was always perfectly controlled, perfectly composed, a glacier in designer clothing. But now she looked shattered, like someone had taken a sledgehammer to her carefully constructed facade and left her exposed and raw. Margaret Blackwood descended from the VIP balcony, her heels clicking against marble steps with military precision. At 62, She still commanded attention wherever she went, her silver hair styled in an elegant chignon, her Chanel suit armor against the world. But her hands shook as she approached the stage, and her voice wavered when she spoke. "I think we all need to talk. Privately." Helena spun toward her mother, fury blazing in her emerald eyes. "You knew he was here!" It wasn't a question. Margaret's silence was answer enough. Ryan stepped between mother and daughter, his presence suddenly filling the space like a shield. "Mrs. Blackwood." His voice was carefully neutral, but Helena caught the undercurrent of old pain, old anger barely held in check. "I should go. Lucy's waiting in the car." The mention of another name made Helena's blood freeze. Lucy. He had a child. Of course he did. 15 years was a lifetime. Enough for marriage, children, a whole world she'd never been part of. The knife in her chest twisted deeper. Before anyone could stop her, Helena pushed past both men and walked off the stage, her gown trailing behind her, like liquid shadow. The crowd parted instinctively, recognizing the dangerous energy radiating from her like heat from a forge. She didn't stop until she reached the hotel's lobby, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the parking lot. There, in a battered Honda Civic, sat a small girl with dark curls and Ryan's storm-gray eyes. Even from a distance, Helena could see the child's face pressed against the window, watching the drama unfold. Ryan appeared beside her so quietly she jumped, his work boots silent on the marble floor. "Her name is Lucy," he said, not looking at Helena, but at the little girl waving from the car. "She's 8, loves pancakes, and hates bedtime stories that don't have happy endings." His voice softened when he talked about his daughter, transforming from the careful neutrality he'd used with Margaret into something tender and fierce. "Her mother died 3 years ago. Cancer." The simple words carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights, 1,000 tears cried in hospital corridors. Helena's anger crumbled like sand castles before the tide. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and meant it. Whatever hurt lay between them, a child's loss of her mother transcended old grievances. "Maria," she said, testing the name. "That was her name." Ryan nodded, his throat working around words that wouldn't come. "She was good," he finally managed. "Better than I deserved. Patient with Lucy when the treatments made her sick. Never complained, not once. She made me promise." His voice broke, and Helena saw the boy she'd once loved hiding behind the man's carefully controlled expression. They stood in silence, watching Lucy draw pictures on the fogged window with her finger, hearts and flowers and stick figures holding hands. "She looks like you," Helena observed, and Ryan's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile under different circumstances. "She has her mother's kindness, though, and her laugh." The wistfulness in his voice made Helena's chest ache with memories and might-have-beens. "She asked me this morning if I remembered how to dance. I told her we'd talk about it later." Margaret's heels announced her approach before her voice did. "Helena, Ryan, we need to discuss this situation before it becomes front-page news." Her daughter turned, and Margaret stepped back involuntarily at the fury in Helena's eyes. "What situation, Mother? The one where you paid him to leave town? The one where you let me spend 15 years thinking he abandoned me because I wasn't worth fighting for?" Each word hit like a physical blow, stripping away years of careful politeness between mother and daughter. Ryan held up a hand before Margaret could respond. "She made me an offer I couldn't refuse. $50,000 for my family to relocate. My father had been your gardener for 20 years, with no benefits, no retirement fund. It was the right choice." But his eyes said otherwise, holding enough pain to drown in. "I was 19, Helena. I thought I was doing what was best for you, letting you have the life you deserved." The words tasted like ashes in his mouth. 15 years too late, and hollow with regret. Helena laughed, but there was no humor in it, only bitter recognition of time wasted and chances lost. The life I deserved. Do you know what my life became, Ryan? Board meetings and business dinners and men who see dollar signs when they look at me. I built walls so high even I can't see over them anymore. I haven't danced with anyone since you. Haven't wanted to. The admission hung between them like a bridge. Neither was sure they dared cross. Outside, Lucy had spotted her father through the glass and was climbing out of the car, despite the November cold. She wore a pink coat too small for her growing frame, and sneakers with holes that let in the rain. When she pushed through the hotel's revolving door, her eyes went wide at the marble and crystal, the kind of luxury she'd only seen in movies. But she walked straight to Ryan without hesitation, slipping her small hand into his work-roughened one. "Daddy, why are you inside with the fancy people?" Her voice was clear and curious, innocent of the undercurrents swirling around the adults. Helena knelt without thinking, bringing herself to the child's eye level. Up close, Lucy was even more beautiful, all dark curls and solemn grey eyes that missed nothing. "Hi, Lucy. I'm Helena. I was just dancing with your daddy." The little girl tilted her head, considering this information with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "You're the pretty lady from Daddy's phone," Lucy said, and both Helena and Ryan froze. "Lucy!" Ryan started, but his daughter was already pulling a cracked iPhone from his jacket pocket, showing Helena the screen. It was a business magazine photo from 2 years ago. 30 under 30 successful CEOs. Helena stared at her own image, polished and professional and utterly cold. "Daddy said you looked like Mama when Mama was happy," Lucy continued innocently, oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped. Margaret cleared her throat, uncomfortable with the emotion crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. The Blackwood suite? But Helena wasn't listening anymore. She was staring at Ryan, seeing past his worn uniform to the boy who'd kept her picture all these years, who'd told his daughter she looked like happiness. The boy who'd loved her enough to leave her, who'd carried that love like a scar for 15 years. Lucy tugged on Helena's gown, the silk whispering under her small fingers. "Are you going to marry Daddy now? You said you would if he could dance." The child's matter-of-fact tone would have been funny under different circumstances, but Helena couldn't find her breath, couldn't think past the thundering of her own heart. Lucy, that's not... It's complicated," she managed. "Grown-up things are always complicated," the little girl replied with 8-year-old wisdom. But dancing looked simple. Ryan scooped his daughter up, holding her close as if she were a lifeline. "We should go, Lucy Bird. It's past your bedtime, and you have school tomorrow." But Lucy wasn't ready to leave this fairy tale behind. "Can Helena come have pancakes with us? I could show her my room, and Mama's pictures." The innocent invitation hit Helena like a physical blow, showing her everything she'd lost, everything she'd never had. A home filled with love instead of marble. A child who wanted to share treasures instead of inheriting them. For just a moment, Helena let herself imagine it, sitting in a tiny kitchen, listening to Lucy chatter about school while Ryan flipped pancakes, being part of something real instead of perfectly polished. But the moment shattered when Margaret's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. "Billionaire's mystery dance partner." The story was already breaking online, complete with shaky cell phone video of their waltz. By morning, it would be everywhere. "The media will have a field day," Margaret said, scrolling through early posts and comments. "Helena Blackwood's secret lover. Cinderella story gone wrong. We need to control the narrative before—" "Enough!" Helena's voice cut through her mother's damage control like a sword through silk. She was done with narratives and controlling stories and managing her image. For the first time in 15 years, she'd felt alive. And she wasn't going to let anyone package that into acceptable PR. Lucy had fallen asleep against Ryan's shoulder, her small face peaceful in the harsh lobby lighting. Helena reached out without thinking, smoothing a curl away from the child's cheek. Lucy stirred, eyes fluttering open just long enough to smile at Helena before settling back into sleep. "She likes you," Ryan said quietly, his voice full of wonder and caution. "Kids are good judges of character." Helena's throat tightened with emotion she couldn't name, couldn't control. "I have a proposition," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Not marriage, I'm not ready for that. But dinner, tomorrow night, you and Lucy. Somewhere simple, somewhere real. I want to know who you are now, not who we were." Ryan studied her face in the soft lobby lighting, looking for the catch, the angle, the trap. He'd learned the hard way that nothing good came free, especially from the Blackwood family. But Helena's expression was open in a way he hadn't seen since they were teenagers, vulnerable and honest and terrifyingly real. "Why?" he asked, shifting Lucy's weight so she'd be more comfortable. "Because you kept my picture," Helena said simply. "Because you told your daughter I looked like happiness. Because I haven't felt alive in 15 years, and tonight, for 3 minutes and 47 seconds, I remembered what it was like to dance." Margaret stepped forward, maternal instinct and social conditioning warring in her expression. "Helena, think about what you're doing. The scandal alone will cost millions in stock value. The board will have questions. Your reputation will survive," Helena finished firmly. "Or it won't. Either way, I'm done living my life according to board meetings and stock prices." She turned back to Ryan, her emerald eyes bright with unshed tears and newfound determination. Ryan was quiet for so long that Helena began to doubt herself, began to retreat back behind familiar walls. But then Lucy stirred in his arms, mumbling something about dancing princesses and pancakes, and his expression softened into something like hope. "Okay," he said quietly. "Dinner. But somewhere Lucy can be herself, loud and messy and 8. Helena laughed, and the sound was different from her practiced social laugh, genuine and warm and a little broken around the edges. They exchanged phone numbers like teenagers, Helena's manicured fingers fumbling with Ryan's cracked screen. The hotel around them had emptied out, the gala attendees dispersing into the November night with enough gossip to fuel a dozen dinner parties. Margaret lingered nearby, clearly wanting to say more, but Helena's attention was entirely focused on the man holding his sleeping daughter with infinite gentleness. "Text me your address," Helena said as they walked toward the exit. "I'll pick you up at 6. Ryan paused at the revolving door, Lucy's weight familiar in his arms. "Helena." His voice was careful, formal again. "I'm not the same person I was at 19. Life changes you, hardens you." She nodded, understanding more than he realized. "Neither am I. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we can figure out who we are now, together." The November air was sharp with the promise of winter, cutting through Helena's designer gown like a blade. She should have been cold, but she felt warm from the inside out, alive in a way she'd forgotten was possible. Ryan settled Lucy into a car seat with practiced ease, tucking a small blanket around her sleeping form. The care in his movements made Helena's chest ache with longing for something she'd never had, someone who would hold her that gently, that protectively. "Helena." Margaret's voice stopped her at her Maserati's door. "Are you sure about this? Really sure?" Helena looked back at the hotel, at the life she'd built from marble and ice, and careful distance from anything that could hurt her. Then she looked at the battered Honda pulling out of the parking lot, carrying a man who'd loved her enough to let her go, and a little girl who thought dancing looked simple. "No," she admitted, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I'm not sure about anything. But I'm tired of being safe, Mother. I'm tired of being perfect. I want to be real." She slid into her car, the leather seats cold against her skin, and drove home to her empty penthouse where everything was exactly as she'd left it. Beautiful, expensive, and utterly without life. That night, Helena stood on her balcony overlooking Millbrook's sleeping streets, still wearing her ballroom gown, but with her feet bare against the cold stone. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos already appearing online. Grainy images of her dancing with a mystery man, speculation about her love life that would dominate headlines for weeks. For once, she didn't care about damage control or public relations or what the board would say in their Monday morning meeting. Instead, she found herself humming Strauss, remembering the feel of Ryan's hand on her back, the way he'd looked at her like she was more than her net worth. Somewhere across town, she imagined him tucking Lucy into bed, maybe humming the same melody, maybe telling his daughter about the night he'd danced with happiness and remembered what it felt like to hope. Tomorrow would bring complications, lawyers and publicists and damage control meetings. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, Helena Blackwood fell asleep thinking about the future instead of running from the past. And in a small apartment across town, Ryan Torres lay awake staring at the ceiling, Maria's wedding ring still on his bedside table, wondering if it was possible to love someone new without betraying someone lost. The last thing Helena saw before sleep claimed her was the business card she'd written her personal number on, now probably tucked in Ryan's wallet next to pictures of Lucy and receipts from the grocery store. Such a small thing. 10 digits that might change everything or nothing at all. But for the first time since she was 19, Helena was brave enough to find out which it would be. The city slept around them, unaware that in the space of one waltz, 2 people had remembered what it meant to be alive. And in the morning, they would start the complicated, terrifying, beautiful work of learning to dance together again, not to the music of memory, but to the uncertain rhythm of what might yet be possible.